Zara Bennett didn't belong in rooms like this. Or at least that's what she kept telling herself as she stood beneath glittering chandeliers in the heart of Seoul's most exclusive hotel ballroom. The air was filled with quiet power. Laughter was measured, smiles were calculated, and every handshake carried weight. Zara adjusted the sleeve of her simple black dress, suddenly aware of how small she felt among CEOs, diplomats, and heirs to empires. This was supposed to be an opportunity, her big break through her internship, but right now it felt like a test she hadn't studied for. So she slipped away. Out onto the balcony, the city stretched endlessly below her, glowing with life. Up here, away from the noise, she could finally breathe. The cool night air brushed her skin, steadying her racing thoughts. "You look like you're trying to escape." The voice was calm, low, and unexpectedly gentle. Zara turned, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. He stood a few steps away, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his presence quiet yet impossible to ignore. His eyes, sharp, observant, rested on her, not with judgment but curiosity. "I guess I am," she admitted, offering a small smile. Instead of laughing, he nodded as if he understood more than she said. They talked, about nothing and everything. About being out of place. About expectations. About choosing your own path. His words were careful but sincere. And somehow in just a few minutes, Zara felt seen in a way she hadn't expected. When she turned to leave, her heel caught slightly. Before she could fall, his hand reached out, steady and firm. And just like that, something shifted. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just real. A moment neither of them fully understood, but neither would forget. The city of Seoul moved fast, too fast for hesitation, too fast for second thoughts. But for Zara Bennett, time seemed to slow in the strangest way after that night. She told herself it was nothing. Just a conversation. A stranger on a balcony. A fleeting moment that only felt important because everything else that evening had felt overwhelming. People met, people talked, and then they moved on. That was how the world worked, especially in places like this. Except, he didn't disappear. The first time she saw him again, she almost convinced herself it was coincidence. Zara was seated in a conference room, nervously reviewing notes for a presentation she wasn't sure she was ready to give. When she looked up, there he was, standing across the room, speaking quietly with a group of executives. Kang Jae-hyun. She didn't know how she knew his name. Maybe she'd overheard it that night. Maybe it had lingered somewhere in her thoughts. But hearing someone greet him confirmed it, and suddenly he wasn't just a stranger anymore. He noticed her. Of course he did. Their eyes met briefly, and instead of looking away like most people would, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't familiarity. It wasn't distance either. It was something in between, acknowledgement. Days passed. And then it happened again. A cafe near her campus. Zara had gone there to escape the stress of deadlines, hoping a quiet corner and a warm drink would help her think. She was halfway through her work when she felt it, that strange awareness. She looked up, and there he was. This time he approached. "Do you always disappear from important rooms?" he asked, his tone as calm as before. Zara blinked, caught between surprise and something else she couldn't quite name. "Do you always follow people who do?" A faint smile touched his lips, not amused, not offended, just thoughtful. "Not always." There was no pressure in his presence. No expectation. He didn't sit too close, didn't linger too long. They spoke again, about her studies this time, about his work in vague terms he never fully explained. But what stood out most wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't. There were silences between them that didn't feel awkward. Pauses that felt intentional. As if he was choosing his words carefully, or perhaps choosing not to say certain things at all. When he left, he didn't ask for her number. Didn't make promises. Didn't try to extend the moment beyond what it was. And yet, Zara found herself watching him walk away, a quiet question settling in her chest. Because once could be coincidence. Twice could be chance. But 3 times? That felt like something else entirely. By the 3rd time Kang Jae-hyun crossed her path, Zara Bennett stopped calling it coincidence. There was a pattern now, subtle, almost invisible, but real enough to unsettle her thoughts. He never appeared in obvious ways, never interrupted her life abruptly. Instead, he seemed to exist just at the edges of her world, stepping in only when the moment allowed it. And somehow that made it more confusing. It was Lena Park who broke the quiet illusion. "You said his name is Kang Jae-hyun?" Lena asked one evening, her tone shifting from casual curiosity to something sharper. Zara nodded, seated cross-legged on her bed. "Yeah. Why?" Lena didn't answer immediately. She pulled out her phone, hesitated, then locked the screen again as if she had changed her mind. That's not someone you just meet, Zara? The words landed heavier than expected. What does that mean? Zara asked, sitting up straighter. Lena exhaled slowly. It means people like him don't move around without purpose. He's not just some businessman. There are rumors. Zara frowned. Rumors about what? But Lena shook her head. Nothing you need to get involved in. That should have been enough. It should have created distance, fear, hesitation. Something to push Zara away from the quiet pull she felt whenever Jaehyun was near. Instead it did the opposite. Because the man Zara had met didn't feel dangerous. He felt controlled, careful. As if every step he took had been measured long before it happened. Still, the seed of doubt had been planted. And it began to grow. A few days later, Zara stayed late at the library, buried in assignments and unaware of how quickly time had passed. By the time she stepped outside, the campus had grown quiet, shadows stretching long under dim lights. Her phone battery was dead. Her surroundings unfamiliar. And for the first time since arriving in Seoul, she felt uneasy. Footsteps echoed faintly behind her. Zara quickened her pace. The sound followed. Her heart began to race, thoughts tangling into worst-case scenarios she couldn't stop. Then, Zara. Her name, spoken calmly, cut through the fear. She turned sharply. Jaehyun. Relief flooded her so quickly it almost made her dizzy. I didn't mean to scare you, he said, his voice steady as always. You shouldn't walk alone this late. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You just showed up again. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. I was nearby, he replied. It was a simple answer. Too simple. But before she could question it, he stepped slightly closer, not invading her space but close enough to feel reassuring. Come, he said quietly. I'll walk you. And despite everything Lena had said, despite the unanswered questions and the quiet warnings in the back of her mind, Zara nodded. Because in that moment, whatever secrets he carried felt less frightening than being alone without him. Seoul had begun to feel less like a foreign city and more like a place Zara Bennett was slowly learning to understand. But some days still pressed too heavily on her chest. This was one of those days. The weight of expectations had followed her from morning to night. Missed calls from her father, deadlines stacking endlessly, the quiet pressure to prove herself in a world that didn't wait for anyone. It all blurred together until even breathing felt like effort. So she walked. Not toward anywhere in particular, just away from everything. The streets were alive, but Zara felt distant from it all, like she was watching life happen from behind a glass wall. She didn't notice how far she'd gone until her steps slowed, her energy draining, her thoughts too loud to ignore. And then, you're running again. She didn't need to turn. Am I that predictable now? She asked softly. Jaehyun stepped beside her, his presence as steady as ever. Only when something is wrong. Zara let out a quiet laugh, though there was no humor in it. Everything feels wrong lately. He didn't interrupt. Didn't offer quick solutions or empty reassurance. He just listened. And somehow that made it easier to speak. I thought coming here would make things clearer, she admitted. But it's like I'm trying to keep up with a life that's moving faster than I am. The words came out heavier than she expected, her voice catching slightly at the end. For a moment there was silence. Then gently, carefully, Jaehyun reached for her. Not sudden. Not overwhelming. Just certain. He pulled her into a quiet embrace. Zara stiffened for a second, surprised by the closeness. But there was nothing demanding in it. No urgency. No pressure. Just warmth. Just steadiness. And slowly her shoulders relaxed. The noise in her mind softened, replaced by something she hadn't realized she needed, stillness. I don't have all the answers, he said quietly. But you don't have to face everything alone. Zara closed her eyes, letting his words settle. It wasn't a grand promise. He didn't swear forever. Didn't claim anything more than the moment. But somehow it felt stronger than words. When he finally let go, the world didn't feel as heavy anymore. And though Zara didn't fully understand why, she knew one thing for certain. Whenever she was with him, the chaos inside her seemed to find its way back to calm. Some news changes everything the moment it's spoken. Zara Bennett realized that the instant her phone buzzed with her father's name lighting up the screen. She almost didn't answer. Not because she didn't love him, she did, but because lately, every conversation with Marcus Bennett came with questions she wasn't ready to answer. About her future. About her choices. About whether she was still the same daughter he had raised. But this time felt different. Zara, His voice came through warm but firm as always. I'm coming to Seoul. Her breath caught. What? I've been meaning to visit, he continued. It's time I see how you're really doing, and who you've become out there. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. He wasn't just visiting. He was coming to look closer. I'll be there in a few days, he added. We have a lot to talk about. The call ended shortly after, but the weight of it lingered. Zara sat still, her thoughts racing. Her father had always been protective, sometimes too protective. He trusted her but not easily. And for reasons she didn't fully understand, he had always been cautious about the kind of people she allowed into her life. Especially men. Without thinking, her mind drifted to Jae-hyun. And almost as if the universe had decided to complicate everything at once, he began to disappear. At first it was subtle. A missed message. A shorter conversation. A moment where he seemed distracted, distant, like his thoughts were somewhere far beyond her reach. Then it became undeniable. He stopped showing up. The cafe felt emptier. The campus walks felt longer. Even the city itself seemed colder without the quiet comfort of his presence. When Zara finally saw him again days later, something had changed. He stood a few feet away, the same composed figure, but the warmth in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by something guarded. You've been avoiding me, she said, her voice steady despite the tension building inside her. I've been busy, he replied. The answer was simple. Too simple. Zara stepped closer. That's not the truth. For a brief second his composure faltered, but only just. There are things you don't understand, he said quietly. Then help me understand. Silence. It stretched between them, heavy and unresolved. Jae-hyun looked at her, really looked this time as if memorizing something he might lose. Then he stepped back. Some distances are necessary, he said. And just like that, he walked away, leaving Zara standing there, caught between confusion and hurt, with a growing feeling she couldn't ignore. Whatever was coming had already begun. Some truths don't arrive gently. They don't wait for the right moment or soften their edges before revealing themselves. They crash into your world, sharp, sudden, and impossible to ignore. Zara Bennett wasn't looking for answers that night. She had only gone to return a folder left behind during her internship meeting, the building unusually quiet as she stepped through its polished halls. Most of the lights were dimmed, the silence stretching in a way that made every sound feel louder than it should. She shouldn't have stayed. But then she heard voices. Oh, serious. Not meant to be overheard. Zara slowed, her steps instinctively quiet as she approached the partially closed conference room door. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but something about the tone pulled her closer. And then she heard his name. Jae-hyun has already taken control of the situation. Her heart skipped. Another voice responded, sharper. Control? You mean elimination. That's what he does. Zara froze. Elimination? The first voice repeated carefully. Lower your voice. You know who he is. Pause. Then. He's not just a businessman. He never was. Kang Jae-hyun runs things people like us aren't supposed to even know exist. The words hit harder than anything she had expected. Runs things. Not works for them. Not connected to them. Runs them. Zara's breath became shallow, her thoughts spiraling as every memory of him replayed in her mind. His calmness, his control, the way he always seemed one step ahead of everything. It wasn't coincidence. It was power. She stepped back slowly, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give her away. The urge to leave, to pretend she had heard nothing, nearly took over. But it was too late. Because now she knew. And knowing changed everything. She didn't wait. Didn't think. Zara found him that same night. Jae-hyun stood exactly where she somehow knew he would be, alone, composed as if the world had never once shaken him. But this time, Zara wasn't the same. Tell me it's not true. Her voice cut through the air, unsteady but firm. He turned. Their eyes met. And in that single moment, he didn't deny it. Silence said more than words ever could. You could have told me, she whispered, hurt breaking through despite her effort to stay strong. Jae-hyun's expression softened, but he didn't step closer. There are parts of my life that don't belong in yours, he said quietly. That's not your choice to make, she replied. Another silence. Heavy. Final. I never meant to hurt you, he added, his voice lower now, almost regretful. Zara shook her head, her chest tightening. But you did. She took a step back. Then another. I don't even know who you are anymore. That was the truth that hurt the most. Not what he was, but what he had hidden. Jae-hyun didn't stop her as she turned away. Didn't reach out. Didn't call her name. And somehow that hurt more than anything else. Because for the first time since they met, he let her go. The distance between them didn't just grow, it settled. Like silence after a storm, heavy and unmoving. Zara Bennett tried to return to normal life, but nothing felt the same anymore. Every familiar place carried memories she couldn't escape. The cafe felt too quiet. The streets too long. Even the air seemed different, like something important had slipped through her fingers without warning. And then her father arrived. Marcus Bennett walked into her life and soul the same way he always had, steady, observant, and impossible to ignore. The moment Zara saw him at the airport, a wave of comfort washed over her. For a second she was just his daughter again, not someone caught between secrets and emotions she couldn't untangle. "You look tired," he said after pulling her into a brief hug. Zara forced a smile. "Just busy." But Marcus wasn't a man who accepted surface answers. "I didn't come all this way for just busy," he replied, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "We'll talk." And somehow Zara knew he meant more than school work or daily life. The dinner was supposed to be simple. Just the two of them. A quiet evening to reconnect. But Marcus had other plans. "I invited someone," he said casually as they were being seated at an upscale restaurant. Zara frowned slightly. "Who?" "You'll see." Something about his tone made her uneasy. Moments later the answer arrived. Zara didn't notice him at first. But she felt it. That familiar shift in the air, the quiet awareness she had come to recognize before she even saw him. Her breath caught. Jaehyun. He stood a few steps away just as composed as ever, his presence commanding without effort. But this time there was no distance, no coincidence, no chance encounter. This was deliberate. Zara slowly turned to her father, confusion already forming into something sharper. But Marcus wasn't surprised. He was watching Jaehyun. Closely. Carefully. As if he had been waiting for this exact moment. "Jaehyun," Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying a weight Zara had never heard before. "It's been a long time." Zara's heart dropped. Jaehyun inclined his head slightly. "Mr. Bennett." No hesitation. No confusion. Recognition. Clear. Undeniable. Zara looked between them, her pulse quickening as the realization settled in. You know each other?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Neither of them answered immediately. And that silence confirmed everything. Marcus leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. "Know each other?" he repeated. "That's one way to put it." Jaehyun's gaze flickered to Zara for the briefest moment, just enough to show something unspoken, something complicated. Then it returned to Marcus. "We were more than acquaintances," Jaehyun said calmly. Zara's chest tightened. "How?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Marcus exhaled slowly as if weighing how much to say. "There was a time," he began, his voice steady, "when we trusted each other with more than most people ever could." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Unfinished. Zara's mind raced, trying to piece together a past she had never known existed. Her father. Jaehyun. Connected in ways that clearly went deeper than business, deeper than coincidence. And suddenly everything made sense. The distance. The hesitation. The silence. This wasn't just about secrets anymore. It was about history. A history that had just stepped into the room, and wasn't leaving anytime soon. The truth didn't explode, it settled. Heavy. Unavoidable. Final. Zara Bennett sat in silence long after the dinner ended, her thoughts tangled in ways she couldn't separate. The night had answered questions she hadn't known how to ask, and created new ones she wasn't ready to face. Her father and Jaehyun weren't strangers. They weren't even distant acquaintances. They were connected by something deeper, something serious enough to change the way they looked at each other even now. And somehow, she was caught in the middle of it. "You're not seeing him again." Marcus's voice was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. Zara looked up from where she sat across from him in the hotel suite, her chest tightening. "You don't get to decide that." "I do," he replied calmly. "Because you don't understand the kind of man he is." Zara shook her head, frustration rising. "Then help me understand instead of shutting me out." Marcus hesitated. For the first time since arriving, his composure cracked, just slightly. "There are things in my past," he said slowly, "things I worked very hard to leave behind. Jaehyun is part of that world." "What world?" Zara pressed. But Marcus didn't answer directly. "Dangerous decisions," he said instead. "The kind that don't just affect you, they follow you." Zara's heart pounded. "He's never hurt me." "That's not the point," Marcus replied sharply. Men like him don't live simple lives. And anyone close to them pays for it eventually. The room fell quiet. Zara looked away, her thoughts pulling her in two directions at once. Her father's fear felt real. But so did everything she had experienced with Jae-hyun. The calm. The care. The quiet way he had always made sure she was safe, even when she didn't realize she needed protection. "I'm not a child," she said softly. Marcus's expression softened, but his resolve didn't. "I know. That's why I'm asking you to be wise." Zara didn't expect to see Jae-hyun again so soon. But he was there. Waiting. As if he had already decided what needed to be said before she even arrived. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly when she approached. Zara stopped a few feet away, her emotions steady but clear. "That's not your decision either." For a moment, something almost like relief flickered in his eyes, but it faded quickly. "This doesn't end well," he said. "You don't know that." "I do," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "Because I've lived it." Zara stepped closer, closing the distance he had been trying to maintain. "I'm not afraid of your past," she said. "I'm afraid of walking away from something real because of it." Silence. Jae-hyun looked at her as if memorizing every word, every expression. Then slowly he shook his head. "I won't be the reason you lose your father," he said. The words hit harder than she expected. "And I won't stand between you and a life that's safe." Zara's chest tightened. "So that's it? You just decide for both of us?" "It's not that simple." "Then stop making it simple," she replied, her voice breaking slightly. For a second, just a second, it looked like he might step forward. Like he might choose differently. But he didn't. Instead he took a step back. And that distance said everything. "Some choices," he said quietly, "are meant to protect, not to win." Zara stood there, her heart caught between love and loyalty, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. The city didn't feel safe anymore. Not because it had changed, but because Zara Bennett had. Every shadow looked sharper now. Every unfamiliar step behind her felt heavier than it should. Even the spaces she once walked freely through now carried a quiet tension she couldn't ignore. She tried to tell herself it was paranoia. But deep down she knew better. Something was wrong. It happened too fast to fully understand. One moment, Zara was leaving her internship building after a late meeting. The next, she noticed a car that didn't match the rhythm of the street, too still, too patient. Her steps slowed instinctively, her instincts screaming before her thoughts could catch up. Then the doors opened. A presence moved toward her. Zara turned, heart racing. And then he was there. Jae-hyun. He appeared between her and the threat without hesitation, his posture calm but unmistakably firm. No panic. No confusion. Only control. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. Zara froze. What is going on? But he didn't answer her immediately. His attention was locked on the men approaching, his expression unreadable but sharp enough to silence the air around them. A tense exchange followed, brief words, cold recognition, unspoken warnings. Then it ended just as quickly as it began. The strangers backed away. The street fell quiet again. And only then did Jae-hyun turn to her. "You're not safe right now," he said. Zara's voice shook slightly. "Because of you?" Pause. "Because of my world," he corrected softly. Before she could respond, another voice interrupted the silence. "Enough." Marcus Bennett stepped out from across the street. He had seen everything. And for the first time, Zara saw something shift in her father's expression. Not anger, not fear, but recognition. Jae-hyun didn't move. He didn't need to. Marcus looked at him for a long moment, then at Zara. "You didn't involve her," Marcus said quietly. Jae-hyun met his gaze. "No." A heavier silence followed. Then Marcus exhaled as if releasing something he had held for years. "I saw what I needed to see," he admitted. Zara's eyes widened. "Dad." But Marcus raised a hand gently. "I didn't come here to control your life," he said. "I came to protect it." He looked at Jae-hyun again, this time differently. Not as an enemy. Not as a past mistake. But as a man who had just stood between Zara and danger without hesitation. And something in Marcus softened. "I understand more now," he said quietly. Zara's breath caught. For the first time, the wall between her world and Jae-hyun's didn't feel completely unbreakable. Not gone. But changing. Jae-hyun took a small step back, his voice steady but lower now. "I never wanted her caught in this," he said. Marcus nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time we figure out how to stop that from happening." Zara looked between them, Disbelief slowly turning into something fragile but real. Hope. And for the first time since everything began, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning fighting to survive. The world has a strange way of testing what people call love. Not with ease, not with comfort, but with pressure, distance, and impossible choices that force the truth to rise. For Zara Bennett, everything had led to this moment. Not the gala where she first met a quiet stranger. Not the nights filled with unanswered questions. Not even the truth that shattered everything she thought she knew. But this, standing in the space between fear and forgiveness, between the past and a future that still hadn't decided if it would exist. Days had passed since everything changed. Since Marcus Bennett stopped seeing Jae-hyun as only a shadow from his past. Since Jae-hyun stopped trying to disappear from Zara's life. And yet, nothing felt fully settled. It was quieter now, but not finished. Zara stood by the riverside that evening, the city lights reflecting softly on the water. The wind was calm, but her thoughts weren't. She wasn't waiting out of confusion anymore. She was waiting for clarity. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't turn immediately, because she already knew. "You came," she said softly. "I said I would," Jae-hyun replied. Zara finally turned. He stood there, not distant, not guarded in the same way he used to be. Still strong. Still controlled. But something in him had shifted too. Less hidden. Less alone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Because some feelings didn't need introduction anymore. "I almost walked away," Zara admitted. "I know," he said quietly. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "You always know too much." "I've spent my life watching things fall apart," he replied. "I learned to recognize the signs." Zara stepped closer this time. "No more deciding alone," she said. His gaze softened slightly. "Zara? If we're going to do this," she interrupted gently, "we do it together." Silence settled between them, not heavy this time but honest. Then Jae-hyun did something he rarely did. He closed the distance. Not rushing. Not overwhelming. Just choosing her. Zara stepped into his arms, and this time the embrace wasn't about comfort from pain. It was about acceptance. About choice. About staying. When he held her, it wasn't like the first time, when everything was uncertain and fragile. This time it was steady. Real. "I don't want a life built on fear," Zara whispered. "Neither do I," he replied. From a distance, Marcus watched quietly. He didn't interrupt. Didn't step in. Didn't change the moment. Because for once, he understood that protecting his daughter didn't mean holding her back. It meant trusting her to choose. Jae-hyun looked at Zara, his voice low but certain. "I can't promise a perfect life," he said. Zara nodded. "I don't want perfect. I can't erase my past. I'm not asking you to." Pause. Then he added, softer than before. "But I can stay." Zara's eyes glistened slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "Then stay." And for the first time in his life, Kang Jae-hyun didn't walk away from what mattered. He stayed. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the world had become safe. But because love, real love, was no longer something he had to protect from a distance. It was something he finally chose to live inside. Together.